God had shown Pharaoh that a severe famine was coming in the land of Egypt after 7 years of plenty. After 7 years of plenty. And Pharaoh had appointed Joseph to manage the 7 years of plenty and the following years, so that there would be food for his people. So in the 7 years of plenty, Joseph had stored up much grain. They lost count of the amount of grain that they stored up in those years. And now, after that time, when the famine came, the people began to be in need. This need brought Jacob and Joseph's brothers to dwell in the land of Egypt, as we read at the beginning of Genesis chapter 47. Joseph settles them in the best part of the land, a grazing area, apart from the other people, and he provides for them. And so the Israelites are not integrated into Egypt, but they live and dwell as a separate people in the land. I find it fascinating the way that Joseph managed Egypt on behalf of Pharaoh. For we find that having collected all this food, he then sells it back to the people in such a way that the people end up being slaves of Pharaoh, or servants of Pharaoh. No doubt there were huge costs involved in purchasing the grain, although its purchase price might have been low, and storing the grain for over 7 years. Then it needed to be distributed in a way that it did not run out, but lasted the 7 years. It seems that the people themselves didn't take it upon themselves to store grain for themselves. They were happy to hand it over to Joseph for central storage. But in selling it back, he brings a total restructure of society. Let's read together from Genesis chapter 47, verse 13. Now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. So Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed." Then Joseph said, "Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock, if the money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. When that year had ended, they came to him the next year, and said to him, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is gone. My lord also has our herds of livestock. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate." Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his field, because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he moved them into the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests did he not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their lands. Then Joseph said to the people, "Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your households, and as food for your little ones." So they said, "You have saved our lives. Let us find favour in the sight of my lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day, that Pharaoh should have 1/5 except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. My name's Arthur. Thank you for joining me as we've read this account of Joseph's administration of Egypt on behalf of Pharaoh. I'm not quite sure what one might expect. We could think that Joseph would have just distributed the food that had been collected, but no, he sells it. And when the money has run out, he trades it for their livestock. And when their livestock has run out, he trades it for their bodies and their land, and restructures the whole society, moving the people into cities. And so, rather than having a broad-spread rural society, we have the great cities of Egypt being formed as a result of this famine, as people move into the cities, no longer the majority of them growing their own food, the whole structure of the society being changed. The famine extended all up into the land of Canaan as well, so it's specifically mentioned that the people of Canaan also came down to Egypt to buy bread and paid a great deal to Egypt for that bread. And so this increased the influence of Egypt over the land of Canaan, and was part of the process of weakening Canaan and giving strength to Egypt. In due time, when the children of Israel left Egypt, Egypt's power was broken, and so Egypt's influence over Canaan was also reduced at that time, providing the opportunity for the Israelites to settle in the land. But that's in the future. Abraham was told that the children of Israel would be sojourners for 400 years before they could occupy the land of Canaan. I take it that 400 years begins with the birth of Isaac. Isaac was 60 when Jacob was born. Jacob was 130 when he came into the land of Egypt. So 190 years of the 400 have passed when the children of Israel come into the land of Egypt, and they would be there another 210 years before they left under the leadership of Moses. And in this time they multiply greatly, because they have not become subject to Pharaoh. And of course that is part of the reason why strife develops in the society between the Israelites and the Egyptians after Joseph's death. So the people of Egypt belong to Pharaoh, and the way that society then operates is that Pharaoh provides them seed grain to grow, and they must return 20% of it to Pharaoh. So we have a flat taxation rate of 20% imposed on Egypt. The total restructuring of society and this taxation brings much wealth and greatness to Pharaoh, and is part of the reason why Egypt became such a mighty nation. Rather than being lots of independent settlers settled over the countryside, it became an integrated society with great political power in the hand of Pharaoh, and that power remained there for many years. As Moses wrote, the taxation rate remained until this day. But the people were happy to hand over all of their rights, all of their money, their livestock, their land, and their own bodies to buy bread. And of course this is a problem with living in the world. So many people are prepared to hand over everything that they have just for the lusts of the flesh, the needs of the flesh. But the challenge for us, the challenge that the Lord Jesus brought, was, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? But the children of Israel were servants of God. They did not become servants of Pharaoh at this time.